Imagine a place where the air is thick with smoke, the ground is covered in dust, and the sound of machinery never stops. A place where millions of people, including children, work in unsafe conditions to make products that end up in stores and homes around the world. These are the manufacturing slums of India. In these hidden corners of major cities like Delhi, Mumbai, and Ahmedabad, the world's consumer goods are produced under some of the most extreme and dangerous conditions imaginable. But what is the true cost of this cheap labor? And what is the story behind these slums? Today, we're diving deep into these places, uncovering the harsh realities, the danger, and the untold stories of survival and resilience. India is the world's second most populous country, with over 1.4 billion people. It's also one of the largest economies, driven in part by a thriving manufacturing sector. But here's the catch. Most of the products that we take for granted, everything from our smartphones to our clothes, toys, and leather goods, come from a shadow industry that's often invisible to the global consumer. That industry is centered in India's manufacturing slums. These slums, often called industrial colonies or workshops, are packed into small spaces on the outskirts of major cities. What's interesting is that they are not like the stereotypical slums we see in the movies, where people are unemployed and living off government aid. No, these people are working constantly. They're a crucial part of India's export-driven economy, even though the world rarely sees the conditions in which they work. Here in these slums, workers spend long hours producing everything from textiles and shoes to electronics and toys, often with no safety regulations or access to workers' rights. But there's a dark side to this rapid industrialization. While India's middle and upper classes benefit from this booming economy, the workers in these manufacturing slums are paying the price. The living conditions in these slums are among the most deplorable in the world. Picture this: families living in tiny rooms, some no bigger than a closet, with no proper sanitation, no clean water, and only a single light bulb to illuminate their cramped space. It's a place where privacy is a luxury and health is an afterthought. Homes are often made of scrap metal and wood, poorly put together and dangerously prone to collapsing. The roads are uneven, filled with dirt and waste, and the air is thick with fumes. Disease spreads quickly in these areas, with poor hygiene and overcrowding making matters worse. The slums may be small, but they are home to millions. In fact, over 100 million people in India live in such informal settlements, and many of them work in these manufacturing hubs. But what's truly astonishing is the fact that most of these people are working hard just to survive. They're not just facing the challenges of poverty, but also the risks of working in a dangerous environment. Yet, in the midst of it all, they keep pushing forward day in and day out. So what makes these slums so dangerous? To begin with, the factories themselves. They're often no more than makeshift workshops, sometimes no larger than a living room, with machinery that is outdated, dangerous, and poorly maintained. Workers have to share this cramped space with machines that could easily cause severe injuries if something goes wrong. One of the biggest hazards in these slums is the lack of safety equipment. Workers often handle toxic chemicals with no gloves or masks. The air is filled with dangerous fumes from burning plastic and other materials. In fact, respiratory diseases are rampant in these areas, and there's little to no access to health care for the workers who fall ill. But the danger doesn't stop at the chemicals. Fires are a constant threat. In a place where electrical wires hang loose and buildings are often built without regard for safety codes, it's easy for sparks to catch on to the dry, flammable materials scattered around. And when a fire does break out, escape is often impossible. There are no fire exits, no fire alarms, and no help in sight. The result? Thousands of people have been injured, burned, or even killed in fires, machinery accidents, and factory collapses. Despite these dangers, the workers continue because the alternative, living without work, could be even worse. One of the most disturbing aspects of these manufacturing slums is child labor. It's a problem that affects millions of children across India, with many of them working in these very workshops. These children, some as young as 6 or 7, are often forced to work long hours in unsafe conditions, performing tasks that can result in serious injury. They're stitching clothes, packaging products, or working with sharp tools and hazardous materials, all for meager wages, sometimes only a few dollars a week. These children aren't just losing their childhood, they're also losing their futures. They don't get the chance to attend school or develop the skills they need to escape the cycle of poverty. Instead, they are trapped in a never-ending loop of labor, with no hope of a better life. It's heartbreaking to think that these children, who should be learning and playing, are instead living in the same grim conditions as adults, contributing to the very system that exploits them. And the worst part? This is all happening in plain sight, yet the world continues to look away. The damage in these manufacturing slums isn't just about the people working there, it's also about the environment. The factories in these areas produce massive amounts of waste, often with little regard for the surrounding environment. Rivers are polluted with chemical runoff, and the air is thick with smog from the burning of plastic and other materials. This pollution has a devastating effect on the local communities. It's not uncommon to see families living just steps away from these factories, exposed to toxic air and contaminated water. This environmental degradation has long-term consequences. It affects the health of everyone in these communities, causing a rise in respiratory diseases, skin conditions, and even cancer. Yet, for many of the workers, it's a trade-off they're forced to make. They live in polluted, hazardous areas because it's the only place where they can find work. Amid the dust, the smoke, and the grinding machinery, there's something truly remarkable about the people who live and work in these manufacturing slums: their resilience. In these harsh conditions, they don't just survive. They find ways to cope, to support each other, and to keep pushing forward. Despite the lack of resources, the dangers they face, and the hardships they endure, they carry on. They dream of a better life for themselves and their children. Take Aisha, for example, a 45-year-old mother of 3 who's been working in a garment factory since she was a teenager. She told me, "Every day is a struggle, but I want my children to go to school and live a life that's different from mine. I want them to have hope." Her story is just one of many stories of workers who are fighting to break free from the cycle of poverty. But here's the thing: change is possible, and it's already starting to happen. Across India, many activists, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and local groups are standing up for the rights of these workers, fighting to change the conditions they live and work in. One of the most notable organizations is the Self-Employed Women's Association, SUA, which focuses on the rights and welfare of women working in informal sectors like manufacturing. SUA has been instrumental in organizing workers, providing access to health services, and pushing for better pay and working conditions. But these changes don't just happen in the form of large organizations. It's about the local movements, the communities coming together to stand up for their own rights. In places like Delhi's Kirki extension, we see local leaders organizing strikes to demand safer working conditions, better pay, and health benefits for workers in small factories. One such local hero is Manoj, a community leader who has been working tirelessly in the slums of Delhi to raise awareness about the dangers of factory work. He has helped negotiate better safety measures in workshops and has connected workers with organizations that offer legal aid and health services. It's activists like Manoj who show us that, while the task is daunting, it's not impossible to create change. One of the most powerful ways we're seeing change is through the growth of ethical sourcing movements. Companies are starting to recognize that consumers care where their products come from. Fair trade certification, for example, ensures that workers are paid a fair wage, that the environment is respected, and that safety measures are in place. More brands, both big and small, are joining this movement. It's a small step, but a critical one. Take, for instance, the efforts of companies like Patagonia, which are known for being transparent about their supply chains. They've partnered with NGOs and local labor organizations to ensure that the workers who make their clothes are treated fairly. While it's a long way from solving the problem on a global scale, it's a step in the right direction. The manufacturing slums of India are hidden in plain sight, but their story is one that we can no longer ignore. The workers in these slums are more than just faceless laborers. They are real people with families, dreams, and hopes for a better future. It's time we start paying attention to the cost of the things we buy and demand better for the people who make them. If you found this video insightful, if it opened your eyes to the reality of these slums, I encourage you to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can make a difference and help give these workers the respect and dignity they deserve. Thank you for watching, and as always, remember, change begins with awareness.